Oh yeah, that's nice.
Hey, what's up guys? Today we're looking at the ViewSonic VX2758-2KP-MHD. Why are monitors labeled in this type of way? If you are looking for a 27-inch 1440p 144Hz IPS panel 1 millisecond response time monitor like I was, then you have come to the right place. This is one of the cheapest monitors in that category, if not the cheapest monitor. It comes in at about $300 USD or about 400 Canadian. As I said earlier, the model that I have with me today is 27 inches and is 2560 by 1440. Now let's take a look at the actual monitor. We're gonna first start off with the stand. It seems that a good amount of people have issues with it, but for me personally, I'm happy with it and I haven't had any issues. With that being said, I can still see where they're coming from. You can't turn the monitor side to side or change the height of it, but you can tilt it up or down. But that's about it. Not a big deal though, because if this is an issue for you, you can just purchase a monitor arm, and since this monitor has VESA mounting, it will be compatible with practically any. On the back of the monitor, we have the two 2.5 watt internal speakers, the VESA mount right in the middle, 6-button menu control panel. This is where you insert the power cord, audio output, display port, HDMI 1.4, and HDMI 2.0. Something I really enjoy about this monitor are the super thin bezels. These super thin bezels give the monitor a nice frameless design, which makes it a great option for running a multi-monitor setup. This monitor does offer 144Hz, which means that you better not forget to switch it to 144Hz in the Windows settings. But what it really means is that the screen essentially refreshes or cycles 144 times per second as opposed to 60 times per second, which is found on most monitors. Now, whether or not 144Hz is really worth the extra money when 60Hz does the job fine is a point I will get to later in the video. Spoiler alert, yes it is. The 1 millisecond response time generally means very minimal ghosting. For those of you who don't know what ghosting is, it's essentially when fast moving objects leave behind a trail of pixels. So here I'm testing the ghosting on the actual monitor itself, and as you can see, the ghosting is somewhat apparent. Now of course from viewing this image you can say, oh, that doesn't look too good. But keep in mind that I am shooting with 240 frames per second in slow motion and then pausing on an exact frame in order to even see this. What I'm trying to get at is that unless I'm purposefully trying to look for it, then I have honestly never noticed ghosting on this monitor. So yeah, ghosting is not completely gone, but I personally have never noticed any in real world use. When I upgraded to this monitor from my old generic Samsung, one of the most shocking differences was the IPS panel. IPS panels offer the absolute best color performance and viewing angles in comparison with the other two panels, which are generally VA and TN. This fantastic color performance means that this monitor is not only amazing for gaming, but for media creation as well. I personally spend a lot of time watching videos and movies on my computer, so the drastic improvement in color was very noticeable to me. When comparing the viewing angles between my old monitor and this monitor, the difference is pretty much night and day. As you can see, you can essentially look at this monitor from any direction and it's going to maintain most of its color. AMD Freesync is one of this monitor's features, and for those of you who don't know what Freesync does, it essentially matches the monitor's refresh rate to the FPS that you get when you're gaming, which eliminates tearing and provides a smoother experience. Now that we have covered its main features, let's talk about its menu. It's not the greatest, but it gets the job done. The buttons are located on the back of the monitor and there are no unique grooves, so sometimes you press the wrong button. But as you familiarize yourself with the monitor, you just kind of memorize where the buttons are. Now, as you can see, there's a decent amount of settings, and I'm not going to go over each and every single one, but if you really wanted to know, you can just pause the video and read all of them. For me personally, I don't really bother with any of these functions. I just kind of got my monitor, and the display came out of the box kind of yellow, so I did have to spend some time calibrating the colors, but ever since then, I never really had the need to change any of these settings. This monitor does come with two 2.5 watt integrated speakers, but let's be honest, in general, integrated speakers are usually not that great. Here's a sound comparison between the monitor's built-in speakers and my normal external speakers. Now let's talk about the 144Hz. In the context of this monitor, there's not much to say. I mean, it's 144 Hz, right? It's doing its job. But I'm speaking more generally, and not necessarily about this monitor specifically, but just in general, if 144 Hz is really worth the extra money in comparison to the normal 60 Hz. And it definitely is. For me personally, it is beyond worth it and probably one of the best investments I have ever made for my setup. Even just moving my mouse around on my desktop is so enjoyable just because it is so insanely smooth. It's one of those things where if you never experienced it, then you don't really care. It's like trying to use some old Sony Ericsson flip phone from 2006 after you've already gotten used to the current day smartphones. But just don't take my word for it, there are tons of other people who feel the same. Keep in mind that if you are planning to upgrade to a 1440p monitor, your graphics card will have to work harder in order to achieve that resolution. For example, I dropped around 10 to 20 frames per second on Modern Warfare when I went from 1080p to 1440p. If you want to know the nitty-gritty, nerdy details of the monitor with a bunch of numbers, Hardware Unboxed did a great video covering all of that, so be sure to check that video out. Now let's cover some of the cons. Starting off with the single most common complaint, it's the monitor stand. Now, we already went over this earlier, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this complaint is pretty valid. Even though I personally am fine with the stand, the range of motion is very limited and the stand can seem a bit short. But as I said earlier, if this is your main issue about the monitor, you can just purchase a monitor arm for like 30 bucks and get this issue completely resolved. The second most common complaint revolves around the theme of the monitor being defective. Issues such as dead pixels, flickering, or just straight up being damaged right out of the box. Now, whether these problems have to do with ViewSonic and the actual monitor line itself, or rather shipping companies and delivery services not giving a single shit what's inside boxes, is hard to say. I, as well as majority of other people, were lucky enough that we didn't have to deal with most of those issues. I say most because I've had this monitor for about a year now, and just recently I have noticed some very slight flickering. However, it's very rare, and I'm talking maybe once or twice a week and only lasts for a couple seconds type of rare. It seems like the people that did have to deal with most of these issues either had a rare defective panel or suffered the wrath of the delivery service gods. The third most common issue, and an issue that I myself had to deal with, was the color calibration out of the box. For me, the screen was a bit yellow, so I did have to spend some time correcting the colors, but after about half an hour of playing with the settings and doing some research, I never had to deal with this problem again. And lastly, you do have to purchase a separate DisplayPort cable in order to even use 144 Hz. The monitor does come with a cable, but it is HDMI. And yes, even though newer HDMI cables are able to support 144 Hz, the one in the box is not one of those and will lock you at a maximum of 75 Hz. I myself was a little bit annoyed when I discovered this, as I had to drive out and buy a new cable. So for the people complaining that this is false advertisement and the monitor isn't delivering 144 Hz, be sure that you are using the correct cable. Now for the conclusion. After listening to all the pros and cons that this monitor has to offer, remember that this is meant to be a budget monitor, meaning shortcuts such as a not so great monitor stand or some integrated speakers that kinda suck are bound to happen. But that's why this is a budget option. But even those problems are very minor and quite easy to fix. Something a lot of people forget to realize when upgrading their computer or building a new one is that your monitor can be a pretty big bottleneck. Say you dump like $1,000 into your computer and now you can run CSGO or Rocket League at over 250 frames per second. That's great and all, but your monitor is still only 60 Hz and 1080p. And there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, you aren't really using the full potential of your computer. So that's something to think about. The stunning colors coming from the IPS panel as well as the extremely smooth 144 Hz provides a very satisfying experience. In terms of value, for the price that this monitor sits at, I believe that this is a great option for people who want to have a more luxurious experience without having to pay a luxurious price. Thanks for watching the video, guys. If you are interested in this monitor, there will be some links in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I need some money.